Just coming to you on what you mentioned earlier around SMEs. Do you think it's possible for SMEs to implement a skills first approach, or do you think is it just a question that they just don't have the resources, or are there simple steps that they can do to implement a skills based hiring approach?
That's a really good question. So I'm sure Johnny and Terry would have more examples, but just from I look at the review of literature and industry reports. So there's a step by step, but the step is not actually to change, the current practices. It's actually to make a few tweaks. For example, that, I think that Terry already mentioned about, analyzing your jobs. Do you need everything? If you are not, if you don't need everything, all the skills for that job, what are the top three skills you need? And then during the interview, Johnny also mentioned about, behavior based interviews or something like that. I think that, will help the SMEs to not necessarily completely redesign the whole hiring practice, but put, skills into the mind that, what exactly the skills are you looking for and where you can source those skills. With that skill mindset, you are not really look at individual candidates. So I think that's a really important starting point to think about what are the key skills you need.
Great point. And then I think that, I mean, it's a bigger piece of work than it sounds. Identifying kind of what the key skills are for a job. What's the best way for an employer to go about that? And you, having my recruiter hat on, I know how difficult it can be sometimes to engage with the hiring manager on this point. So, what's the best way to kind of understand what are the skills needed to do a certain job?
Uh, from my point of view, I think that engaging with the hiring manager is really important and ask the right questions. When the hiring manager is saying that we need this qualification, we need this certificate, we need this, maybe the question is not to say, okay, we're going to source those people with tick the boxes. Maybe ask question that what are the what kind of people are you looking for? What are the skills needed to do this job? So I think the more
Sure.
conversations with the hiring managers on the skills needs is, rather than just saying, okay, give me this criteria.
Sure. And Terry, coming to you on that.
Yeah, I think an example I'll use to illustrate, I think, is in when I was in Salesforce, we looked at skills based hiring, and we were trying to increase our talent pool because there is such a competition for talent. The particular roles we were looking at were sales development associates and sales development reps. So those people who are a first contact with the customer. We had a qualification in place, which we took away. That was our first step in removing the qualification. But then we also looked at what skills were actually required. And we introduced, as I mentioned earlier, I think the video. So we asked people to do a 3-minute video as part of their application process, and that helped us sort of look at sort of communication skills and things like that. But we didn't kind of do a deep, really, sort of a long list of skills that were required. We looked at sort of the top sort of 3 or 4 skills that we were going to interview for. And that really formed the basis of our interview process. And I think that was really helpful because that aligned our hiring managers in terms of what we were looking for. It actually helped our recruiters in terms of when we were doing the searches. And ultimately then, as we brought people on board, I mean, Salesforce had a full training and enablement program for new hires anyway, so we were always going to add to those skills in terms of what people needed. But it's been very successful. It has enabled Salesforce to really think beyond kind of your standard business degree candidates for these roles, and has resulted in Salesforce really bringing in a very diverse population, which ultimately is more representative of the customers that we serve, which is what every company is trying to get.
Brilliant.